worked in so-called free societies when I reported from totalitarian societies. During the 1970s, I filmed secretly in Czechoslovakia, then a Stalinist dictatorship. I interviewed members of the dissident group Charter 77, including the novelist Zdeněk Urbánek, and this is what he told me. I quote him. "In dictatorships, we are more fortunate than you in the West in one respect. We believe nothing of what we read in the newspapers and nothing of what we watch on television because we know it's propaganda and lies." Unlike you in the West, we've learned to look behind the propaganda and to read between the lines. Unlike you, we know that the real truth is always subversive. Vandana Shiva has called this subjugated knowledge. The great Irish muckraker Claude Cockburn got it right when he wrote, "Never believe anything until it's officially denied." One of the oldest cliches of war is that truth is the first casualty. No, it's not. Journalism is the first casualty. When the Vietnam War was over, the magazine Encounter published an article by Robert Elegant, a distinguished correspondent who had covered the war. "For the first time in modern history," he wrote, "the outcome of a war was determined not on the battlefield, but on the printed page, and above all, on the television screen." He held journalists responsible for losing the war by opposing it in their reporting. Robert Elegant's view became the received wisdom in Washington, and it still is. In Iraq, the Pentagon invented the embedded journalist because it believed that critical reporting had lost Vietnam. The very opposite was true. On my first day as a young reporter in Saigon, I called at the bureaus of the main newspapers and TV companies. I noticed that some of them had a pinboard on the wall on which were gruesome photographs, mostly of bodies of Vietnamese and of American soldiers holding up severed ears and testicles. In one office was a photograph of a man being tortured. Above the torturer's head was a stick-on comic balloon with the words, "That'll teach you to talk to the press." None of these pictures were ever published or even put on the wire. I asked why. I was told that the public would never accept them. Anyway, to publish them would not be objective or impartial. At first I accepted the apparent logic of this. I too had grown up on stories of the good war against Germany and Japan, that ethical bath that cleansed the Anglo-American world of all evil. But the longer I stayed in Vietnam, the more I realized that our atrocities were not isolated, nor were they aberrations, that the war itself was an atrocity. That was the big story, and it was seldom news. Yes, the tactics and effectiveness of the military were questioned by some very fine reporters. But the word invasion was never used. The anodyne word used was involved. America was involved in Vietnam. The fiction of a well-intentioned, blundering giant stuck in an Asian quagmire was repeated incessantly. It was left to whistleblowers back home to tell the subversive truth, those like Daniel Ellsberg and Seymour Hersh with his scoop of the My Lai massacre. There were 649 reporters in Vietnam on March the 16th, 1968, the day that the My Lai massacre happened. Not one of them reported it. In both Vietnam and Iraq, deliberate policies and strategies have bordered on genocide. In Vietnam, the forced dispossession of millions of people and the creation of free fire zones. In Iraq, an American enforced embargo that ran through the 1990s like a medieval siege and killed, according to the United Nations Children's Fund, at least 500,000 children under the age of 5. In both Vietnam and Iraq,